So the film is about James. He's the star quarterback of his high school football team, and it takes place the week before the state championship game. Before the film actually starts, he has sort of a romantic encounter with a teammate, and you sort of see this through flashback during the movie. And so the movie is sort of just about the week before the state championship game and how he sort of deals with this right before the biggest game of his life. Football is an interesting cultural institution because it's sort of the quintessential American sport, and even more than that, it's sort of like this quintessentially American cultural event, phenomenon, or whatever you want to call it. I think right now it's very much at a turning point. You see with issues like Ray Rice just this season, with domestic abuse, with even things like concussions, and then also Michael Sam was a big story going into the 2014 season. And it seems like a lot of the people who are talking about it are sort of from the outside, and football and the NFL, more specifically, is having a lot of trouble sort of talking about it on the inside. And I think my film sort of shows that unwillingness to really confront these issues directly. And I think all these issues, from concussions to domestic abuse to homosexuality, they're all sort of related to masculinity and this sort of problem with how football players sort of present themselves in terms of being a man, and how to be masculine but also not be an asshole. The NFL is really having to come to terms with all these issues, and not just the NFL, football culture in general, I think, is at this turning point, whether it's high school, college, or professional. And so I think telling this in a high school format, in a coming of age format, is sort of perfect, because it's not just this one character's coming to terms with these issues. It's really, the story is being told as a confrontation with these issues, for football culture en masse. So it seemed like the fitting time period, age range for the characters. I think I started writing it in March of 2013, and I wrote it, submitted it to this grant foundation, and then it got accepted in July or August. And then I sort of revisited the script, so it was like this long process of going back to the original script, which the original script was incredibly dense in terms of plot points. There was like intrigue, there was blackmail, there was like all these, it was a lot more dramatic than the final script. And so a lot of that time was devoted to sort of cutting away and whittling down to the moments that felt genuine and didn't feel over dramatized. Because I think that's very important, to have moments that feel earned, I wrote it in a class at Carleton College called Advanced Production, where each student has their own project, and you sort of come in and workshop your project each week. And so my project, it started out as making the movie, and then it became just writing the movie, because it was a little bit too much to chew off, too much to bite off in one term. So yeah, I workshopped it probably 3 or 4 times in that class, got feedback, and it changed considerably in just those 10 weeks. And then I sort of sat on it for a couple months, and then revisited it largely on my own at this point after I got the grant. And that was probably the biggest change. That was when I cut away a lot of the sort of dramatic, sort of like mystery thriller sort of aspects from it, and made it just a sort of more of a tone piece than a thriller, which is probably how it would have been defined in the original script. It was interesting collaborating with people. I'd say at first I was very nervous to even talk about this movie, and it was, I think any person who's making art is always sort of reticent to show it to other people, but this especially because, I had just come out a year before, and so even talking about these things was somewhat difficult for me. And so in a way it was kind of a way to get comfortable with all these things, which was great. And then sort of, get past that anxiety and just get at what are like the best moments to tell this story. What are the best scenes that are gonna tell this story in the most, interesting way, the ones that get at the emotions of the characters in the most revealing way. This film is a very personal film for me because I played football in high school, and I was in the closet in high school, and then I've also played sports while I've been out of the closet. So in a way, you could say that it was difficult to write because it was personal, but I actually think it was a lot easier to write because I was able to draw on, personal experience and also just like, the environment of, the football locker room, the football field, and all those things. It was something that, I'm very familiar with. So that setting, it wasn't a stretch to come up with the setting or the characters. They were all, very real to me. So I think actually it made it a lot easier for me to write and shoot and create. I sort of originally studied film when I studied abroad at FAMU in Prague, which is like the film university in Prague. And they had like a 16 millimeter film production program where the entire program was devoted to making a short film on 16 millimeter. And so I made like a seven minute short, or I think it turned out to be 5 minutes because we cut a lot of it, short film there. So that was sort of where I sort of fell in love with film, and and that was where the desire to shoot this partially came from. But I think also it was important to shoot this specific story on film because it sort of builds on, a tradition of football movies. There's all these, Remember the Titans. I think Friday Night Lights was probably shot on digital, but, to sort of capture that classic vintage football look, I thought shooting it on 16 millimeter would really capture that in a perfect way. And then, this story, I think, redefines that genre and is sort of an attempt to redefine, the culture in general, or at least to sort of document how that culture is changing. So I felt like it had to be shot on 16 millimeter almost. I'm thinking about certain documentary projects because I've been working on a documentary for the past 6 months as an editor. And so I've been thinking a lot in like the documentary mindset. And if, I would never shoot a documentary on film. I'm not insane. So, but I really do love film, and I think there's something special about it. And, any chance you can get to shoot on film nowadays, I feel like you got to take it because, time is running out on film. Film is a medium and digital video is another medium, and they do similar things. They're both, motion pictures, but they're different mediums, and so they should be used for different projects.